Hi everyone, it's Hannah from Hand Done Crochet, and today we are crocheting this top-down raglan sweater for children. Now it looks tricky, but it's a really easy construction. We just go round and round and round, making a front and a back and a sleeves all together, and then we just continue for the body section, and then we work the sleeves afterwards. There's no seaming involved at all, and the only stitches that you'll need to know are a half double crochet, a US half double crochet, and a single crochet. The pattern comes in sizes newborn baby through to age 10, and you'll find in the description I'll add links for where you can find it either on my blog or as a PDF in my stores. You'll also find in the description all the information about the materials that you will need, but let's go through that now just so you can go and grab what you need to make this. So for the yarn, I chose to use Hobie's Amigo yarn, which is a beautiful category 3 DK weight yarn. It's 100% acrylic, so really great for washing and cleaning when the children get it messy. And we get 175 meters or 191 yards in 50 grams. It comes in beautiful colors, so go and have an explore of that, and all the amounts, the quantities that you'll need is listed in the description below and in also the pattern, of course. You'll also need a 4mm crochet hook, so that's a G crochet hook, a pair of scissors, a needle for your ends, and a few stitch markers. So go grab your supplies and let's get going. Okay, so to begin our baby sweater, we are going to put a slip knot on the hook there. And then we're going to start working in foundation half double crochet stitches for this first round of the yoke. And as you'll see in the written pattern, there are different numbers for the different sizes because the starts of the sleeves and the front and the back will be different for different sizes. But the principle is exactly the same, and how we increase is exactly the same. So apply the principles I'm going to show you now to any size in the pattern that you would like to. So for this size though, we are going to begin with foundation half double crochet 8. So we do that by chaining 2 to begin with, and then yarn over and working into that second chain from the hook, so that very first chain we made. I'm going into the back bump here, and then I am going to work a foundation half double crochet in it. So I'm going to yarn over and pull through, then I will yarn over and pull through just one, because that creates a chain for us to work the next half double crochet into. Then I yarn over and pull through all 3, and that is our first foundation half double crochet made. And to begin with, we need 8 of those, and that's going to be for the start of our sleeve. So that's 1, and then we go into that chain that we made, making sure that we have both parts of the stitch over our hook there. We yarn over and pull through, then we yarn over and pull through 1, and then we yarn over and pull through all 3. So that's 2. You keep repeating that until you have the number that you need for the size you're making. Here we have 3. Now we need to chain 1, and then we carry on, and we're going to now start making our foundation half double crochet for the front or the back. So we do that by doing 19 now. So we've done that chain 1, and now we're going to work into this chain here that we made for our foundation stitches. So we go 19 now. So now I've done 19, and I'm going to chain 1. And then I'm just going to repeat what we've just done here. So our next sleeve is going to need 8. So continue with these foundation half double crochets. That's 1, 2. Now we need to chain 1, and we're ready to do our matching 19 here. So now I've done those 19, and I'm going to chain 1, and I'm ready to slip stitch in my first to join, making sure that I don't twist there. And there we have our first round. Now we'll see here that it's a very odd shape. It feels very odd. We've got these 4 chain 1 spaces that are now going to become the corners. Let's turn it that way so we can see better. So these are going to be the tops of our sleeves, and this is going to be the front and the back, depending on where, if you would like to add a button, whether you would like the button at the front or at the back. Now for round 2, we are going to chain 1, and then in the stitches of the sleeve, for all of the sleeve stitches actually, we are going to be working into the back loop and the 3rd loop of our stitches. So at the when we're working in the round, the 3rd loop is this one tucked right over here at the back, and then our back loop is the one that sits right on the top, and our front loop is the one that sits here right at the front. So we're going to work in everything but the front loop basically. So we are going to work across here, making sure that we get the back loop and that 3rd loop. And we're going to work in each of the stitches up until you get to the chain 1 space. So for this size, that's 8 stitches, but for different sizes, that will be a different number, obviously. Once you've done those stitches up until our first chain 1 space, we're now going to, in that chain 1 space, work a half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet, all in that chain 1 space. And this is what's going to start to increase the size of our yoke for us. So that all went into that chain 1 space. And then for the next round, we have a chain 1 space ready to do the next increase into. Now we come to the fun bit here. So our main stitch pattern is going to create this beautiful texture across the front here and the back of the sweater up until we get to the other sleeve. And let's find that chain 1 space for the sleeve there. If you want to put stitch markers in your chain 1 spaces, that would be an awesome idea. But what we now need to do is work across these stitches here to create the patterning that we have. So what we're going to do is we are going for this size to work into the back and the 3rd loop. So as we've done for the sleeve stitches, in 2 of the stitches. And then for the next 15 stitches, we are going to work in our set main pattern that we're going to use. And for that, we are going to work into the 3rd loop, into the back loop of the next, and then into the front loop of the next. And those 3 stitches that repeat there creates the pattern now for these 15 stitches. But again, that number will be different depending on which size you're making. So I've worked those 15 stitches, and now I come to, there's 2 more before we get to our chain 1 space for the corner. So we're going to work as per the sleeve stitches into the 3rd and the back loops. Then in our chain 1 space, we're going to work our corner, which is our half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet. And now we've come across our next sleeve. And so this sleeve gets a half double crochet into the back and 3rd loop, and here we are at our next chain 1 space. So we do our next corner of a half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet. Now we're going to match what we did on this front section here as to the back, because we have the same amount of stitches regardless of which side you're making. You have that same number of stitches here. So for this size, remember, we're going to go into the back and 3rd for the first 2 stitches. Then we're going to start that pattern repeat of the 3rd loop, then the back loop, then the front loop, and we do that for 15 stitches or however many it says for the size you're making. And then when we get to the last 2 here, we're going to work into the back and 3rd loop of those. Then we have our final chain 1 space that we are going to work our corner in of a half double crochet, chain 1, and a half double crochet. Now that is round 2 complete, and I just wanted to say that this is an intentional space here. So you can either seam that together if you're happy with the size of your neck hole. It should be plenty big enough, but my children have got quite large heads, so even if you make a standardized neckline for them, it doesn't fit. So what I thought I'd do is I'd leave that as a little capacity for you to put a little button on if you would like a little bit of extra space to open and get over heads. Okay, so now we have done round 2. From round 3 onwards, we're going to be working in continuous rounds. So we're not going to slip stitch to join here, we're just going to go straight for it and start round 3. And our sleeve stitches, remember, always work into the back and the 3rd loop of each stitch. So we're going to put one in there, and then I'm going to put a second in there, but then I'm going to mark my first stitch. I should have had that ready, shouldn't I? I'm going to mark my first stitch because it's super easy to get confused now as to where we are. So then carry on working all of those side stitches for your sleeve. Sleeve, that's the word I was looking for. Your sleeve stitches up until we get to that chain 1 space. And don't forget you've added an extra stitch there, so you've done into that half double crochet of the corner, and then into the chain 1 space we're going to work a corner. So that is our half double crochet, chain 1 and a half double crochet. Now for our odd numbered rounds from here onwards, so from round 3 onwards, for our front and our back section we are going to be working into just the 3rd loop. So twist over and find that 3rd loop and work along, because then that pushes that texture forward for us. Now we're at that chain 1 space and we can work our next corner. So a half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet, and now we have the side of our next sleeve. So remember, they're going to be into the back and the 3rd loop of each of the stitches. Got a very jiggly stitch marker, haven't I, today? And now we're here at the corner. We put our half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet, and then for our other side we are going to be working the 3rd loop for this round. So in each of the stitches work into the 3rd loop, making sure that that very first stitch here where we've increased, you catch that one, because that's very easy once you've made that corner to miss that one. So I would definitely recommend that once you have done each round you do a stitch count, just to make sure that you've put everything in all the places that they need to be. Whichever size you're making, when you work another round, your stitch count will increase by 8 stitches, because we're putting 2 new stitches in each of those chain 1 spaces at each corner on every round that we do. So here we are at our last corner. Oops. We're going to half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet. And then remember that we have, this is our first stitch of the round, so we have one more stitch to do here, which is the one that's been added for the side of this sleeve. So that one goes in there as the final stitch of that round. So that's round 3 complete. Now our next round, round 4, is going to have our patterning in it, but in a slightly different way. So bear with me. We're going to work straight into that first stitch, and we're going to do our sleeve stitches all the way to that chain 1 space, where we're then going to work our corner. Do make sure that you move your stitch marker, because we're working in these continuous rounds, it's very difficult then to find it if not. And then into our corner, our chain 1 space, we do a half double crochet, chain 1 and a half double crochet. Now the main pattern starts and stops in various places for different sizes, because we need to make sure that our multiples of 3 line up on top of each other. So for this size, we're now going to half double crochet into the back and 3rd of just 1 stitch there. And now we're ready to start our main pattern here. and that's going to be now for 21 stitches across, because we've added enough to fit that multiple in. And you'll see that for each of the sizes, as soon as you can fit the next multiple in, that's what we do, we add it across the sides here. And so this next part of the main stitch pattern, we began in the third loop for the last round, but we're actually going to start in the back loop for this one. So we shift across one, we go back loop, then we go the front loop, and then we go the third loop. So it's the same loops, but just a different sequence. So we're going to go back, and then front, and then third, and repeat that for as many times as it says to across. Then for this size, we've just got one stitch left to work into before we get to the corner space. So we're going into the back and the third loop of that one, and then we work our corner. So half double crochet, chain one, half double crochet. Then we have our sleeve, which is plain sailing here. Then we're going to repeat along this other side what we did for the long side here. So this size had one stitch before we went into our pattern. And then we're ready to go back loop to the front loop and to the third loop. So back, front, and third. Whoops, nearly third. Then we just have our one stitch before we get to our chain space for the corner. So we have a half double crochet, chain one, half double crochet, and then you'll find that we've added stitches, so therefore we've got two more. So each round you do, you'll have more stitches here to catch up with where the beginning of the round is as we get bigger and bigger. So we just need to complete those two for this round, and then we're ready for the next round. Now round 5 is a repeat of round 3. We just have more stitches to work in. So we'll whip through this one quickly. We work into the back and the third loop up until you get to that chain one space. Then here we have our first corner, half double crochet, chain one, half double crochet, and then we're ready, because it's an odd round, we're going to work into the third loop of each of these stitches across here. Then into our corner we go. Then we work our second sleeve. Next corner is up. Then we're ready for the third loop all the way across to the next corner. Then our last corner to work is here. And then, as I said, we've got some extra stitches for the side of this sleeve. And you remember the last round we had 2, and now we've got 1, 2, and 3 to work, because we're increasing by 1 each of these corners. And so that's round 5 complete. Now round 6, we begin in exactly the same way. We're going to work our sleeve stitches here up until the corner. And now we're at the corner, we're going to do our half double crochet, chain one, half double crochet. And then for this size, on this part of the repeat, we have got exactly the right amount of stitches to just go for it in the pattern here, but do check, because your size might not be ready to start yet. You might need to do some extra stitches here at the side. So, but for this one, we have done now 1 and 2 of the textured rounds here. So we're now ready to move along the sequence again, and we're going to begin in the front loop of the stitches for this one. So we now repeat front loop, then the third loop, and then the back loop. And that works all the way across now. Front loop, third loop, and then the back loop. all the way until we get to our corner, but do check, as that might not be applicable for your size. But this is the pattern repeat for the amount of stitches that it tells you. Here we are then, there's our corner, and then we have the plain sailing sleeve to do, then our corner here, and then we're going to match what we've just done here with starting in the front loop, then the third loop, then the back loop, all the way to this corner, work our last corner, and then catch up with ourselves with our sleeve stitches here. And so once you have completed that round, you'll know everything that you need to know to make, regardless of what size you're making, to make the entire yoke. It carries on for a certain number of rounds for each different size. Now this size has 14 rounds, I believe. So I will carry on working those, and you'll see in the written pattern that we alternate. We do the different shift in whether we go third loop, back loop, front loop, and then the next time we come to it we do back loop, this is making my brain work, back loop, front loop, third loop, and then we do front loop, third loop, back loop. I may have said that wrong, but it was written in the pattern correctly, and hopefully after watching this now you'll know exactly what I'm on about. So work the rounds of the yoke that you need to for the size that you're making sure that the sleeves are fairly straightforward, but the fronts and backs, make sure you watch out for how many stitches you work before you start the patterning, because as it gets bigger and bigger it will become more and more obvious if one of those stitches is out of sync. So work around until you have completed the rounds for your yoke and you're ready to split for the sleeves. Then come back to me and we'll do that together. For each of the yokes, you need to work a set number of rounds as described in the pattern. For this size that we're making, I need to do 14 rounds. And here I am on the last round, because the last round of each of one of them, I need to show you just a slight difference when we get to our corners. So this is the first stitch of this final round, and I have worked this portion of the sleeve, and I have worked one stitch into that chain one space. And normally we would work another chain one and then another half double crochet in there, but we're not going to work the chain one for this. So we're just going to work 2 double crochet into that chain one space, and that's going to give us the right count for our sleeves and for our body section. And then you carry on working the round with your texture stitches as they need to be, depending on where you are in the sequence. But each of these corners get just the 2 half double crochet in them rather than the half double crochet, chain one, half double crochet. So make sure you work that final round of the yoke and then come back to me and I will show you how we split for the sleeves. So here I am, I've done that last round of the yoke, and I'm going to break my yarn and then pull that through, and I'm just going to put a stitch marker and catch my hook before it goes, put my stitch marker in that final stitch there, because we will come back to that. So now your yoke should look like this, and we are ready now to start working the body. Now we know that these are the sleeves and these are the front and the back, and what we now need to do is just work for the front and the back and wait for the sleeves, do the sleeves afterwards. And the way that we do that is we're going to fold this, and then we're just going to work in rounds around these stitches that we have here. Now for this size there are 45 stitches for the front and for the back, so we're just going to work in 90 stitches that we have around here. So I'm just going to join to the first stitch that corresponds to the front or the back of the body. So we have our 2 stitches in this chain one space, and so it's going to be the second of those stitches that then will work across this portion here. So we join, and we are working in the third loop only for these stitches, and you're going to need to make sure for the size that you're making that your stitch count corresponds to that size. And we work for this size, we're going to work these 45 stitches all the way across. So it's just the same stitch as we've been using as we've been going round and around for the fronts and the backs. It's just that when we get to this side of the sleeve, we're going to do something slightly different. So here I am, I've done my 45 stitches, and just at this point, this is really fundamental, make sure that you get the stitch count right here, because it's very easy to think that the next loop it actually belongs to the front or the back that you're working when it actually doesn't. So just double check your stitch count here, because if it goes awry here, the rest of the body will be out of sync too. So what we're going to be doing now is ignoring all of these stitches of this sleeve here, and we're actually going to fold our work over, and you're going to find the stitch that begins the back here. So we have our 2 stitches in this chain 1 space, and so it's the second of those stitches, and we're actually just going to work a half double crochet into that 3rd loop there, because we're going to imagine that the sleeve doesn't exist. We don't need that sleeve section right now. There we go. So pop that stitch in there, and don't worry about the pulling or the gapping here at the moment. It will all sort itself out once we add the sleeve into this hole here. So then work away in the 3rd loop only of all of these stitches up until we get to the end of this section. So to our next corner where our sleeve section starts. Okay, so there we have it. I've come to the end of that section as well, so that we now have got the sleeve stitches facing us. And what we need to do is now fold over so that we come back to these body stitches. And now you'll see in the pattern that the remaining body stitches just use the main set pattern that we have been using here. So it's a six round repeat that we carry on, and depending on which size, you will start it at a different point now, depending on how many rounds you've done for your yoke. So we carry on in the same way to create that seamless pattern throughout. But I'll just show you, regardless of whereabouts in the pattern you are for your size, what we're going to be doing is joining straight in continuous rounds. We're going to be joining straight into this first stitch here. So for this one, we are working the back loop, then the front loop, and then the 3rd loop, but that will be different for different sizes, so do make sure you check out in the pattern where you are in the sequence. Now I should have got this stitch marker ready first, and that's rolling away again, wants to get away from me. There we go. We need to put a stitch marker in that first stitch of the round so that we can always locate where we are, and then it's just a case of now we have 90 stitches for this size in our body, and we're going to work this patterned round here, then we're going to work our 3rd loop round, then we're going to work your next patterned round of the sequence, and so on for as many times as it tells you to repeat in the written pattern. Then the great thing about this now is that if you have the person that is going to receive this with you, you can now try it on, because you've got 2 little armholes here and you have the body section. So if you have them around, you can try this and they can see if it fits nicely for them. And the great thing now then is you can change the length. Now there are instructions in the pattern for standardized lengths and how many rounds you'll need to do for those, but it's great. My boys are very, very different. My older one has a much slimmer chest, so I'll need to go down a size for him actually in chest measurement, but he's actually quite long. He's got quite a long torso, so I will make extra rounds for him just as and when he needs them, before I then add my cuff. So there is a little instruction for a bottom cuff that you can add if you want to. You don't have to, of course, but work your body rounds to fit the person that you're making it for, or just follow the instructions if you're making it for someone that can't try it on, or if it's a surprise or a gift or something. So work the rounds that it tells you in the pattern or that you choose to, and then come back to me and I'll just show you what we do for the little bottom cuff. Once you've worked the amount of rounds that you need to for the size that you're making on the body, we can then add a small cuff at the bottom. This can be as big or as small as you like it, but there are recommended amount of rounds in the pattern. And all we're going to be doing is working into that 3rd loop. We're going to be working a single crochet in each of the stitches around, and we're going to be working in continuous rounds again. So make sure you move that stitch marker once you've done a couple of them, so that you know where the beginning of your round is. And as I say, for this first round that we do of it is going to be in that 3rd loop that we've been using and know already. And now for our second and subsequent rounds of the bottom cuff, we're just going to work into the back loop only. So our single crochet only has a front and a back loop. So we're going to work into the back loop only and work a single crochet in each of them. So do remember to move that stitch marker so you don't get yourself lost. And then you just carry on in that way, working as many rounds as the pattern instructs you to or that you would like to for your bottom cuff. Then when you've done that, you're going to slip stitch into that first stitch to join, and then you'll be ready to break your yarn, and then we can look at adding the sleeves on. Now that we've finished our bottom cuff, we are ready to put some sleeves on. Now these sleeves go into the holes that we've allocated for them. We know we have enough stitches here because this when we split for the sleeves, that worked out right for us. So for this one that doesn't have the stitch marker in, we're going to be joining under the arm here. So I'm going to recommend that we work, I want this opening to be at the front of this little sweater. So we're going to work in continuous rounds, so it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to find the stitch that is the first stitch of the sleeve, which if you remember we had those 2 half double crochet in that chain 1 space. So it's the second of those stitches, and as we did with all of the sleeve stitches, we're going to carry on going through that back and third loop there, and we are going to join our yarn, then we're going to chain 1 and we're going to work a half double crochet in all of those stitches around. So your stitch count should be the same for both of your sleeves. For this smallest size that I'm doing here, I believe it's 34. So that first round gets a stitch in every stitch around, and then we're going to work in continuous rounds as we have been doing. Here we are back at the start then, and I've done a stitch in every stitch, and then the next round is going to be the same count again. I think for all the sizes that's true. So then we go straight into that first stitch that we have there and start to work in continuous rounds. So then grab yourself a stitch marker and pop it in that first stitch that we have here. Now you're probably thinking, what on earth is that space there, Hannah? Well, don't worry about it. We're absolutely fine. It's going to basically need to join up because we're working in those continuous rounds. The first rounds that we do need to then be matched up. So I have my tail here for, in fact, let's do it now. I have my tail here for the body that we started there. So that one is going to need to match up. Let me grab a needle. That one is going to need to match up with the beginning of the body section. In fact, you can probably do it all with this tail that we have here now actually. So this one matches up here with this side and pulls in there. And then the underarm matches up with the underarm, so the one that we have just done there. So just close that gap. I won't break that yarn just yet, but just so that you can see that's how that closes up in there. And then we've got that first stitch of that round and it begins now our underarm there. So don't worry if you have a hole there, that's perfectly normal. But subsequent rounds now that are the same stitch count, carry on in that same way with a stitch in each stitch around, so our half double crochets all the way around. But then you will get to a point in all of the sizes where you get to a decrease round of the sleeve because they are slightly tapered in to just a comfortable cuff. And when we come to a decrease round, what we're going to need to do at the beginning of the round, that I will show you here now just so that you can see it, is a half double crochet 2 together. Now that will be at the start of the round, as I said, not here in the middle of one as I am now. How we do it is we yarn over and we go into the next stitch, we yarn over and pull through, then we yarn over to begin another half double crochet. We don't finish that one, we're going to put 2 together, and we start the next half double crochet, we yarn over and we pull through, we yarn over, and now we pull through everything that's on your hook. and that has made 2 stitches there down into 1 there, and then you carry on the rest of the round as usual. So that is what we need to do just at the beginning of a round when we get to what's called a decrease round. And they're not very noticeable. It's really nice and easy way to do a decrease there. So all of the sizes will have decreases at different points. So make sure you check in the pattern for where yours have them. And the other thing that I then wanted to show you, because that's it, that's all there is to know for the sleeves, up until we get to the point where we're going to put the sleeve edging on if you would like to, and that is worked in the same way as we did this bottom band. So the single crochet into the stitches and then into the back loop of the single crochets. The only other thing to know is when we come to do this side, we popped that stitch marker in there, didn't we? And so what we're going to do is join our yarn again to this last stitch. So I'm going to actually undo this last stitch and rework it. I did it very securely there, didn't I? I'm going to rework this stitch so that I can then join the yarn so that we're already then working in continuous rounds. So this is the last stitch of that round, and I won't finish it with that yarn because then I will get the new yarn and I will join it here, and then I will begin my sleeve at this point here, and it will go around and around. So that's it. There we are. That's what we need to do for the sleeves. Work away as written in the pattern, but you can also bear in mind that you can change the length of your sleeves by adding or taking rounds away. It's entirely up to you, and you can make them tighter, you can make them looser, you can work out wherever you want your decreases to be. So work those sleeves and then we are nearly there. So since finishing the filming of this little version here we did together, I have been convinced by my 4-year-old that he wanted proper cuffs on the ends. I made him this darker blue version here, and he said, but mummy, I want my cuffs to come in like my others do that you make me. So I have decided to add that to the pattern as well. So you can make whichever version you prefer, obviously. Now the pattern works and is in the written pattern for doing as we have just made together. But what I'm going to show you now is just how simple it can be to add this single crochet back loop only ribbing to wherever you would like to add it to. So we're going to do it on this little example, and it is entirely up to you. We'll add a bit of length obviously to the sleeves and to the neckline and to the bottom. So if you want to do this without adding these single crochet rounds, you absolutely can, but you can also add it with them. It won't add that much to the actual length and width of everything. So the principle is the same as you'll see for the neckline, for the sleeve cuffs and for the bottom cuff, but what we're going to be doing as each time we do it, we're going to be slip stitching. We're going to do a join as you go method, and we're going to be slip stitching into a different number for each of the different ones that we're doing. Now I'm going to do one of the sleeve cuffs to show you, and the principle will be exactly the same on the neck and the bottom. And you'll get, as we go, you can actually tailor it really nicely to whoever you're making it for. I certainly did for Oliver because he wanted tighter sleeve cuffs and he wanted a nice loose and easy bottom, and then actually the neckline he made me pull it in even further, but you still have to make sure it goes over their head. That's my top tip with the neckline. So whichever cuff that you're doing, whichever rib that you're adding, what we need to do is first join it to one of the stitches. Now I would say, especially on these sleeves, it would be better to join it under the arm because we are going to have a join and a seam. So pop it into that stitch there, and then chain out as many as you would like the length of your cuff to be. So for Oliver I did 4 stitches, so you're going to chain out 4, and then you're going to do just 1 more. So there's a chain of 5 there. Then working back along that chain in the second chain from the hook, I'm going to work into that back bump a single crochet, and then a single crochet goes into the back bump of the next and the next and the next. So basically a single crochet into the back bump of each of them along. So that should give you the number of stitches that you want for your rib. And now what we're going to do is we're going to slip stitch into the next stitch around, and then in this first instance we're going to turn and then working back along those 4 stitches we have, you're going to work into the back loop, sorry, of each of those stitches now. So we have 1, 2, 3, and then 4, and you can work into the full part of the stitch for the last one, or you can work into the back loop depending on how you would like your rib, how tight you would like your rib to sit at the end. Then we are ready to turn, and we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to work into the back loop as well again. So back loop only from now on, and work a single crochet. And now it's up to you how many you want to slip stitch into when you get back to this round here. So you can, if you want a slightly looser one, you can just slip stitch into 2. So you could go here, we can go 1 and 2, and then you're ready to turn, and you carry on doing that rib. And that is what I did for Oliver's one, and it gives you a fairly straightforward rib, but it does cinch it in slightly. But then what I'll do is we'll turn, and I'll show you another version. I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to single crochet in the back loop only of each of these. If you would like to pull in even further, and this is what I definitely did around the neckline, you'll see in the written pattern I do it very much so across the front and the back. I do it evenly in 2s across the side like we've just done there, but across the front and the back I do what we're going to do now and use up 3 stitches along. So we are going to, where are we attached to, into that one. So what I'm going to do is slip stitch in this next one, then I'm going to skip the next stitch, and then I'll slip stitch into the next. So that has used 3 stitches from our final round here, and it just pulls that ribbon even tighter. So then we can single crochet into the back loop only, and you can alter this as you go around as you're making the cuffs. The great thing about the children's sleeve cuffs especially is that they're so diddy that it doesn't take very long to do at all. So you can have a go, you can try it on them and see if it fits and see if it's comfortable. And if not, you can just have a jiggle around and have another go. So just keep working those single crochets in the back loop only, and then slip stitch into as many as you feel you need to around. And you can do a combination. You can do slip stitch and use just 2 for this next one, and then you can use 3 for the next one. It's entirely up to you. And then when you get to the end, obviously it may be a slightly uneven number, but that's absolutely fine. You can just work it as feels comfortable for you. So that's all we do for the neckline, the bottom and the sleeve cuffs. And then when you've worked your way all the way around, meet me back and I'll just show you how we easily seam these up. Now we are back to where we began. We can just seam this up, and it's very fiddly on this small size here, but we're just going to work into the stitches of the first row and of the last row, and we're going to slip stitch them together. And then when you've done that, you are ready to break your yarn. And then you can weave in those ends that you have, and you will have yourself a pretty little cuff. Thank you so much for joining me to make this cute little crochet sweater for little ones. I really hope you've enjoyed making it. I'd love to see your version, so do come and find me on social media. I'm Hand Crochet wherever you'd expect me to be, and I will see you again soon.